So this is the County of San Diego collaborative presentation with Behavioral Health Services, Child Welfare Services, and our contractor from Finch, Laura McClarin, talking about the virtual CANS conversation and the Child and Family Team meeting. In the County of San Diego, we have a overall overarching vision, which focuses on making sure that every resident in San Diego County is healthy, safe, and thriving. The CANS fits perfectly into this because it helps us ensure that our children and families are having good mental health, good physical health, and good overall well-being. Continuum of care reform. You guys may have heard about the KDA lawsuit, which triggered some changes in the state of California and specifically in DCFS, which is Los Angeles County Child Welfare. Really, the focus of this legislation change is to ensure that children and families who interact with any system in California, so probation, child welfare, behavioral health, have an excellent experience, that we're working collaboratively to support the family, that we're being incredibly transparent with the family's involved in all of the decision making, they understand the decisions that are being made by the agency, even if they don't agree with them, they should understand us. We want to ensure that our youth receive high quality, effective services to mitigate any impact. We also want to make sure that our youth are getting screened for mental health services at least twice a year. That's the current mandate with the CANS, to ensure that if there's mental health needs, that they're being met. It really helps with effective accountability and transparency, and it makes sure that families hold us accountable for what the state expects. 2 years ago, the state released the Integrated Core Practice Model. We call it the ICPM for short. If you Google California Integrated Core Practice Model, this manual actually pops up, which is about 73 pages. It's really an incredible manual. It's the only state document I've ever read that was completely understandable, and it made me nod my head every single time I read it, every line. It just makes good sense. So I just want to encourage you guys to take a look at it. It probably would support practice in your counties and in your states and other countries. It really focuses on how we need to interact as agencies to support the family. Sometimes there's barriers between the agencies with communication. By the way, do you guys know that HIPAA was created to make communication easier? That definitely was not the outcome of HIPAA, but that was the intention. About half of our families are served by one of the other big systems, but specific to child welfare in San Diego County, we currently refer about 79% of our children to therapy, which means that about 79% of them are interacting with behavioral health services. So it's really important that child welfare and behavioral health services have good relationships, that we're collaborative, that we communicate well to support the families. Within the state of California, about a quarter of our kids are served by another county. So if all of the counties in San Diego for child welfare, behavioral health, and probation are following the principles of the Integrated Core Practice Model, we can be sure to really help meet the needs of the children and family as effectively as possible. Child and family teams. San Diego County has been using a family-centered meeting for over 10 years. We originally called them team decision-making meetings, was the Casey model. Then we went to family-centered meetings. We've been doing child and family teams since January 1st of 2017. It's a great model. I think you guys are pretty familiar with it. It really focuses on engaging the family, their natural supports and the formal supports, bringing everybody together so that we can really do the best to support the children and families that have open cases with child welfare. It's really focused on authentic engagement, transparency, no blame or shame is the goal. And each family member is asked and supported to voice their strengths, preferences, and needs. So one of the pieces of feedback the state got with the KDA changes through the Continuum of Care reform was that the family didn't feel like their voice was as loud as the agency voice. And I told you guys I've been with the agency 22 years. I definitely think 22 years ago, our voice was really, really, really loud. It was like we were screaming and the families were whispering, right? And a lot of social workers were leaning down and hearing the whispers, but not everybody was all the time, right? One of the best changes I've seen in our agency and in the state expectations over time has been that the family's voice should be as loud as our voice. So the child and family team is really where we come together and make sure that our voices are equally loud. And Laura, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Shelly. So we are, Fred Finch has been the pleasure of providing the child and family team meeting since 2018. We went with a neutral provider. So this is really where we keep the family voice and choice, the building on their strengths and their engagement going. We don't provide services apart from the CFT meetings. So our neutrality really helps facilitate the conversation. We organize child and family team meetings with all the necessary members that need to be there. There are some mandated members that we need there, as well as some unmandated yet equally important. Most important people that we want to get at the table is the child or youth or non-minor dependent. Of course, there are some exceptions if there's some age considerations or some sensitive topics, but we really want the youth involved as much as possible at all child and family team meetings so their voice is heard, as well as the family. Protective social workers, their supervisors, probation officers are also mandated members and really important, as well as some others listed on your screen, like the tribal partners. The program really does try to recruit, and we do recruit natural supports. The only criteria for a natural support is that the youth or family really thinks they are important in their life. And we bring them in. We've had from nannies to a next door neighbor to a best friend to other colleagues. And this is parents too, if they have a relative or an aunt or an uncle present. So really bring in natural supports. And they all come and are present at this child and family team meeting. And then I'll pass it over to Eileen, who will talk more about the CANs specifically as it relates to child and family team meetings.
Great, thanks. So as Laura mentioned, we're going to segue into talking about putting the CANs into practice. So first we wanted to just highlight that once CDSS released the version of the CANs to be utilized by CWS, Behavioral Health Services and Child Welfare Services, we closely collaborated to ensure that the CANs assessment for both units closely aligned. And then to support this effort, BHS included the trauma module and then added 3 more modules, the sexuality, juvenile justice, and substance use. And we did this to ensure that our BHS providers could complete a comprehensive CANs assessment, which mirrored our behavioral health assessment. So additionally, I'm going to be on the first slide for just a little bit. BHS adopted the use of the CANs EC since this was also included in the IP CANs utilized by CWS. We believe that aligning these tools would put into practice the one CANs philosophy. So that's why we work so closely, because we just wanted to make sure that both BHS and CWS were working off of one CANs. However, this was not as easy as it seemed. And I think that we had a lot of struggles in these discussions about the BHS CANs and the CWS CANs. And so I'm not quite sure if Dr. Lyons heard my anguish, but he released a wonderful article in July 2019 about the concept of one CANs, which was the one person, one story, one CANs. And it really highlighted that hearing a story always includes various perspectives. And this one CANs idea really comes into play when we're listening to the family story in CFT meetings, when all members, they all have a different perspective. So again, this is why it's so important to have everyone around the table. Shelly and I, we consistently message this idea of one CANs to BHS providers and social workers, and we encourage the sharing of the results during the CFT meetings. Another important message about the 1 CANS is because it's also the foundation for the case planning for CWS and the treatment planning for BHS. And so ensuring that when we are working with the family, we're looking at the same needs and we're not generating, a case plan over here that looks different than the treatment plan over at BHS. So I just really wanted to highlight the importance of the 1 CANS. And then my last point in regards to our CANS versions is just highlighting the trauma module, which BHS incorporated into their CANS. And this is a unique module just because it's static with a yes and no. So there are events that have happened and they're not going to change. And so I know that this is sensitive information sometimes to discuss in a CFT meeting talking about trauma, but it's interesting. I had the opportunity to view, or I guess observe, one of the CFT meetings, and the youth was really assertive in indicating some of the CANS trauma module items that he felt were not a yes. He gave a rationale, and I guess together the team collectively agreed that we would just put it as a yes, but understood his perspective about why he felt it wasn't a yes. So I thought that conversation was really incredible, and that the youth really came forward to share his thoughts about it. Okay, so now we are going to move to the next slide. So for this slide, we just wanted to, again, just provide an overview about the implementation in San Diego County. So in July 2018, BHS rolled out the CANS, and then CWS shortly thereafter, October. The following fiscal year, which was last year, that's when BHS incorporated the EC CANS into practice. And CWS was already doing that. So it just assisted us in aligning more. And for that first year, we understood it was communication, training, and more training. And so we did develop something called the Super User Group in 2018 through 2020, but we've actually changed it and updated it to a best practice group to pull in those that are administering the CANS. The Super User Group really consisted of program managers, and Shelly would join the group, and some other leads from CWS would join the group. But we weren't really putting it into practice per se. And so now that we have the best practice groups, there are many, I guess, great accomplishments that we've had in hearing about some best practices. And then additionally, we wanted to highlight that we have provided virtual CANS trainings, which have gone very well. And both BHS providers and CWS social workers attend, as well as our term providers. And so those have been successful.
I was just going to add, we had a question. BHS stands for Behavioral Health Services, and CWS stands for Child Welfare Services. Those are our acronyms in San Diego.
Thank you, Shelly. I'm so sorry. I should know better than to just keep using acronyms.
None of us caught it. We're just so used to it.
Okay, so year 2. And so this was 1920. And so I'm going to focus more on BHS, but what I want to highlight is that we really tried to leverage the CANS data to develop great tools and resources that BHS providers could utilize. And Shelly has, always been a part of it, and I think they've adopted some of them over at Child Welfare Services, CWS. And so I'll go into more detail, but essentially we established a graphic report, and we wanted to take CANS data to see how that was impacting social determinants of health. And so I'll get into more details about that. And then we also developed a crosswalk for the ACEs to the CANS trauma module, and I'll go into details about that. And then lastly, strengths mapping in the client plan. So we'll go to the next slide. So this is our ACEs to CANS trauma module crosswalk. And essentially, the reason that we developed this is that our BHS providers did not feel as though they were accessing the ACEs to screen at all for some of these events. And so what we wanted to highlight is that indeed the CANS trauma module, it does assess for these questions, and it does assess for some of these items. So the importance of this is that, in in BHS, we really believe strongly in care coordination, which means that we're working with our partners such as the primary care physician, educational partners. And so in knowing that if some of the trauma experiences are creating physical symptoms, you definitely should be coordinating with the PCP, or if it's impacting school issues, working with the school. So we just rolled this out recently and shared it with our providers. And so I think they're just getting familiar with it. And if we go to the next slide, so it's a one pager, but we had to split it up in 2 slides for this presentation. So it's every ACEs question, and then we were able to successfully walk it over to a CANS trauma module. The year 3 goal is what we're going to do with this crosswalk is we're going to incorporate the protective childhood experiences. So we really want to utilize this crosswalk as both an assessment and then as treatment planning. And so we're realizing that the protective childhood experiences will be some of the interventions that we could put into place. And I don't know if you're all familiar with the protective childhood experiences, and I'll read them off. So it's ability to talk to family about feelings, feeling or experiencing that family is supportive during difficult times, enjoyment and participating in community traditions, feeling of belonging in high school, feeling of being supported by friends, having 2 non-parent adults who genuinely care, and then feeling safe and protected by adults at home. And so what our hope is to do is to utilize the PCEs and maybe crosswalk those over to the strengths. So any feedback from anyone would be greatly appreciated because we're still in development of this. All right, so moving on, this is the graph that we created that helped us, I guess, spotlight if the social determinants of health are being improved by treatment. And so what we did is we leveraged the CANS items to really show if there's been progress in these specific items. Now, the County of San Diego, we have what are called the areas of influence, but they closely match social determinants of health. And so we leverage those items. And so it kind of goes back and forth, but just for example, for the first item, the health. And so in our areas of influence, it's having physical activity, connection to health home, healthy food, immunizations. And so the CANS item that we leveraged was medical physical. I think there's more to the areas of influence, but it gives us some idea, are these medical physical needs improving? And so indeed, we do see improvement. And so this graph as well, it's one page, but we had to break it up into 2, so we could go to the next page. As you see, we have areas of influence of standard of living, social knowledge. And so all of these social determinants can be leveraged by some CANS items to show if there's been progress. And we leverage both the needs and the strengths items. And so that is another accomplishment. And then lastly, I just wanted to share this. This is what was developed out of our CANS best practice group. And so we have client plans that are templated in our electronic health record, and they do have established applied strengths. And so one of the programs, what they did is they took CANS strengths items and they crosswalked it to the applied strengths to help the rest of the system easily identify those strengths in the client plan with the CANS item strengths. So those are our accomplishments that we're pretty proud of, and more to come for year 3. So I'm going to hand it back over, I believe, to Shelly or Laura.
Yep.
Sorry.
So thanks. I'll talk for a couple of slides specifically just about CANS and child and family team meetings. Most all, I will say, not most all, child and family team meetings in San Diego County have the same structure. They have the same format. So we always start with group agreements, just what are our guidelines for interacting, whether it's, cell phones on mute or, please put on your video as in today. And then we go to strengths. We really focus on what is working well for the youth, what is working well for the caregiver, what is working well for the team, and each member of the Child and Family Team meeting contributes to this. Then we talk about what are our concerns. We have to, right? What are some of the things that brought the youth or the family or the caregiver or the parents in today into treatment or into the services of child welfare or probation. And then we really talk about our action plan. What are we going to do about it? The beautiful thing about the CANs is it flows with this conversation. It furthers the conversation, and there's parallels between the two. So for instance, when we're talking about the strengths of the youth and it's that they're very resourceful or they're very creative or they're very into school, there's direct correlations, and then we can relate that to areas on the CANs. Child adolescent needs and strengths assessment. Likewise, when we're on the concerns, we can relate them to some of the needs that potentially are being put forward. And we've really seen in Child and Family Team meetings, it's helped the discussion around. Before COVID, we'd be in a room together. We'd have visuals out about what the numbers mean, what 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 means for needs, what 1, 2, or 3 means for our strength. And then the family could see that, and then we would have a roundtable discussion. If a social worker thought, well, wow, this is a really high area for the caregiver, but mom was like, no, I don't see it, then we would have a conversation and try and come up with an agreement about what is the plan for that. So it's a really nice tool, and it lends it again, brings it to real life, and I think has helped, in my experience, really show families and caregivers, oh, that's what this means, that you're not just check marking me on all these different items, but yet, oh, we're having a conversation, and I see how it relates to what I'm doing well, what do I need to prove on, and then what we're going to do about it. If you could do the next slide, please. We have gone virtual for all our CFT meetings since COVID hit, since March of 2020. Sorry, I have to keep what year is it again? Oh, it's 2021 next year. We use either a Zoom video platform we offer. We also offer Teams. We have also found a Conference Now Plus. It's an application where you can have an unlimited number of people on speakerphone. So we use one of those 3 modalities. And this is what's been going on in our CFTs since COVID hit, being virtual. We've had increased attendance. We've had more natural supports come. I just can share a story where we literally, it was over phone, and we had dad, and dad was like, wait, there's another natural support. We even had a 9-year-old grandma joining as a natural support via the phone. We've had more lawyers join. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Time will tell.
It's been fine.
It's been fine. But we
haven't had issues.
No,
we were worried about it. We were worried, but it was okay.
I just like teasing because I'm like, oh, lawyers, more lawyers present. Oh no. More lawyers join, but increased attendance. And ironically or interesting, we've had more parents, more caregivers be revealing more, more transparency, more disclosure, potential more commitment, more ownership to some action steps. I think maybe the audio and not being on camera is a little bit more comfortable. And again, more participation. Team members are speaking up. Scheduling has been taking a shorter amount of time. Before it would be more time intensive. Okay, which office or child welfare or probation or the home. And now that there are these virtual platforms where people don't have to travel as much.
So sorry.
No, you're all good. That's been very helpful. Facilitators, because we are a neutral third party, like I said, we are not, we don't work for Child Welfare Services. We don't work for BHS. We don't have, quote, a stake in the game. Our goal is to really facilitate the best meeting and make sure everyone's voice is heard. We've had more authority over upholding our group agreements. We have one youth that kept interrupting, and whenever people tried to talk, he would cut them off. And so our facilitator kept muting him, yet he was very creative, and he found out if he continually would hang up and exit out of the system, he could jump back in and not get him muted. But they were able to work through a solution for that one. I love youth and the creativity. And we've recently received more funding through the CARES Act, so we're being able to purchase more Zoom licenses to hopefully take everything to the next level and do Zoom a lot more, so we can have the video and the audio. Some challenges that have been coming on. And Shelly, if you want to do the next slide, some can include the professionals, you know, us people in the room. We really like Zoom more. Come on, it's so easy. Do this. Our caregivers, there's different familiarity with the platforms, and some families don't want to use their own data or their own minutes to potentially have this conversation. We have had to adapt with using the phone app, or even sometimes if we do have Zoom, a lot of people have their video off. It can be a little harder to read the room. As you all know, communication, they say 80% is body language. So it can be a little bit more difficult to get really where people are. And to that end, the facilitators have to work a bit harder, but we've employed different strategies to get people's participation. Sometimes we do literally write down everybody who's there and then cross-reference, okay, who was talked, who has not talked. We invite people to use the chat function too, so that can help. Confidentiality, we've had to work on a little bit more with, you know, families being like, hey, I could be on the phone in the grocery store. Well, no, we're still talking about, is there no sound for everybody or just a few people?
I can hear.
Okay.
Karen.
I can hear.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I don't want to keep talking if people can't hear.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And so us working with families, with our youth, with our caregivers, and just on these meetings are still very private on what's talked about. Just be cognizant of who's then. And then, like I said, really talking with families more about different technology and helping adapt so we can have more effective meetings. So that's a little bit about how Kansas looked in virtual CFTs. And I think
Awesome.
I'll pass it back over. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm going to share a few success stories, and then we're going to go to questions and answers. We want to make sure we have plenty of time, and it sounds like people have a lot of questions we're happy to talk about. But I just wanted to share, you know, we had a lot of worries going into having the CANS conversation in the Child and Family Team meeting, and I've consulted with a lot of different counties and states, and you know, we all have the same worries. How are families going to feel about being scored? How are families going to feel? Like, are we going to want to talk about trauma out there? Are we going to want to talk, you know? And I will tell you, the things that I worried about the most and we worried about as a county most never came to fruition. We've never had anybody object to being rated or scored with the 0, 1, 2, or 3. In fact, I think it makes great sense to people. They know that a 0 is like an A and a 3 is like a D or an F, right? Like when you think about how people have been rated or graded in other institutions such as the educational setting, it makes sense to them. It's much more, it's much less subjective, I think, than just the social worker saying, hey, you need this, right? One of the best outcomes we've had from the CANS, we've been trying to move the dial on getting parents engaged in case plans as quickly as possible in San Diego. And this is unexpected outcome. Families, because we're having this transparent conversation, they actually understand the connection about why the child protective issue, how that equals the case plan. And we have lots of parents that are getting into services right away. So this has been the most exciting outcome. I've had tons of social workers tell me, wow, mom's getting into services, dad's getting into services. We're starting unsupervised visitation, month 4, month 5. We've been trying to move the dial on our reunification in 12 months for a long, long, long time. And this is really, I'm excited now that we're in year 3, the way that the data works for safe measures, you would like really have to look back 2 to 3 years to see the impact. So I'm hopeful we're going to start seeing the dial move on the reunification in 12 months because getting the parents involved in services earlier is huge. I'll share real quick. The voice of the child is so much louder with the CANS, and Laura might have stories about this too, but I have just heard story after story after story where the child comes in, introduces themselves, and then is quiet for 30, 40 minutes until it gets to the CANS. And then they'll say, what's a 1 in depression? What's a 2 in depression? By the way, everything about the CANS is transparent. So even though we're virtual, we can send the manuals, we can send the stoplight sign. We can send the flow charts. There's nothing secret about the cans, which is really helpful for the transparency. Parents and families haven't been trained on the cans like we have, so they need all the tools and resources there to make it easy as possible. But these kids are actually scoring themselves higher than we would, and they're very engaged in the process. Extended foster youth. We had a foster youth, a social worker. It was in the beginning of the rollout. We trained extended foster care and residential first. Social worker tells me in a unit meeting, yeah, Shelly, I went out there and I told my kid, I'm sorry, we have to do this tool together. And I was like, what? Like, this is how you started your conversation? But it actually worked out perfectly, because we got to depression and the child disclosed for the first time that she was experiencing pretty significant symptoms of depression and anxiety. The social worker had worked with this young lady for months. She knew her really well. She saw her on average 2 to 3 times a month. They had a good relationship. She was a very successful young lady. She had graduated from high school with honors, and she was actually in college. And it was the first time she had disclosed about her depression and anxiety. And then when they got to the ACEs, this young lady had been in foster care for 7 years. It was the first time she disclosed she was sexually abused. It's just a really powerful conversation. We talk to kids all the time. This is, how's it going? How are you feeling? Are you sad? You know, and there's socially acceptable answers to those questions that we see kids respond with, right? But taking the time and really breaking it down and having the manual to guide the conversation makes a difference. We do see more transparency. I also feel like there's a reduction of shame and blame, and I'm keeping an eye on time because I want to give you guys time for Q&A. A reduction of shame and blame. You know, the cans, we aren't asking why. So for example, if back in the day, if mom was like, yeah, my kid has adjustment to trauma, Shelly, she cries every night since you took her out of my house, right? And I'd say, well, mom, the reason I took her out of your house was because of that major domestic violence incident, and you had to be taken away in the ambulance. And like, she thought you might have died that night. Like, it was really upsetting. There's no power struggling with the cans conversation. It's not about why Susie's crying every night. We're just acknowledging that she is, and we need to do something about that. And I feel like that's true also for the parents with their substance abuse or physical, whatever's going on in the home. It's just facts. Yes, that happened. Yes, we need to do something about it. So I really feel like it reduces shame and blame. And then I talked about how the goal of the state is for the family's voice to be as loud as the agency voice. This is helping. I mean, I think in referrals, we're really good about making the family voice loud. As soon as we decide to remove a child, typically the agency's voice is louder, right? It's very rare that parents agree with the child's removal. So in order to get our volume to be the same again, we want to come back to this child and family team meeting so that we can make sure that their voices are loud. I'm going to attach this PowerPoint so that you guys can have it. These are YouTube videos. They are 5 short videos. They're 3 to 5 minutes of us role-playing a CANS conversation in a child and family team meeting. They are hard to hear, but if you use your headphones, you'll be totally fine. I'm going to exit out of here so that I can save it and share it for you guys. People are asking for the attachments. Okay. There were questions up at the top. Laura or Eileen, can one of you guys go to the top of the chat while I'm saving this and attaching it?
Sure, I'm scrolling through. I think that you answered.
There was one at the very top.
Okay,
I think
so
that
Laura,
how do you get your CFTM facilitator on board with the CANS? Did we feel like we answered that one, or should we start there?
No, I think if you could talk to that, Laura.
I was like, they have to be on board with it, not being facetious. They get an overview. So our facilitators aren't like certified in the CANS, yet they receive an overview training. And for us, it's part of the agenda item. So social workers come and they're like, hey, we need to do the CANS today. It's part of the conversation. And I think what I can't relay heavily enough is it does flow into it. And I'm not trying to be Pollyanna by saying that, but like I said, if we really do the structure of the strengths and then the areas of concern or the needs and then the action It's like all of a sudden the cans is laid out there. You have your strengths. All of a sudden, mom's like, oh yeah, now I see, or the UCs for Shelly's example, I'm depressed. Oh yeah, that's why I am going to have to see my therapist, and that's part of it. It translates it and it makes it tangible for them. And sometimes we've had to reassure social workers because they want to go, can I do line item by line item? It's like, no. You do your pre-meeting, you gather your information before. That is really important. Do your pre-meeting, do your conversations before. Yet let us flow through a CFT meeting. What's working well? What are we concerned about? What are we going to do? And then the CANS conversation is interweaved with it. Yeah.
Yes, I asked that question. This is Lisa. Yes, I find I have not started with the CANS yet, but I've started participating in the child family team meetings. But I find that, okay, the facilitator, I don't know about your county, but I know where I am, the facilitator has what she called a permanency plan to complete during the child family team meeting. That's separate from the CANS action plan. As far as that's separate. So her questions, it seems you don't want to take over her meeting, but I noticed that you need follow-up questions in order to accomplish what you need to for the CANS, because while during her meeting, my mind is on those items on the CANS. And I'm finding that you don't want to interrupt or cause a meeting to be long and drawn out, because I need additional information while I have this parent here. If not, I'm going to have to, and I know there are other ways to get your information to complete the CANS. I know that, but while I'm in this child family team meeting, I would like to gather as much information as possible.
Absolutely. And you want to do it with the formal and informal supports there, because they're your fact checkers, right? Like, we actually find that the parents tend to be, so if it's just the social worker and the parent, and we're like, okay, do you think you need substance abuse treatment? And they're like, no, right? No, somebody slipped the meth in my Sprite, Shelly. It wasn't me. No, Shelly. Like, so you have the same arguments every month, right? So yes, you want to do it. When we have the informal supports there, they might say, no, I think I'm a 1 for substance abuse. It's just an occasional problem. And grandma's going to say, no, that's not true. This has been a problem ongoing. And auntie's going to say, you were arrested 2 months ago. So, like, there's just, that's also helps to reduce the power struggle, because, even though I think we're really good about detecting and being aware that that might not be accurate, there's still a different sensation between the social worker confronting you and family just kind of fact checking you, right? So Lisa, I'm assuming you're still doing the what's working well, what you're worried about, and then the action step. That's how we fit it in, right? So somebody asked if the facilitator is the completer of the CANS, but it's actually the social worker, the assigned social worker. So the assigned social worker pre-scores the CANS, like Laura mentioned, pencil scores it. Only the social worker has it. And the reason is we don't want to influence other people. If I say it's a 2, they're going to kind of defer to me, right? Because of my authority. Or perhaps if I say it's a 2 and you're pissed at me, you're going to be like, it's a 1 or a 3, Shelly, just because Shelly said it was a 2, right? So it's better we try to start with, okay, people were worried about depression. What level do you think Susie's at? Is it something we need to keep an eye on? Is it something that's impacting her at school or home? And then we'll help determine the rating, right? But we don't talk about the zeros. So a lot of people ask how long it takes. On average, it takes 15 to 20 minutes additionally per kid. So our CFTs used to be an hour and a half to 2 hours. Since we've added the CANS, they do butt up to 2.5 hours. We have had 3-hour CFTs. Those are long CFTs. So I totally hear what Lisa's saying about adding more time. But most families would prefer to have 1 long one than 2 shorter ones. So it's going to depend on your family. Not every family can tolerate it. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Laura.
And I think that's part of the transparent question. We do have multiple siblings. We ask the family, do they prefer back to back? Do they want to split it up? We have had, part A, part B, part C. Again, it's all like family voice and choice, how they want to structure it.
Yeah, we have some 8 sib families, right? You're not going to get an 8 sib family done in one, unless you have a whole day and you take lunch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yet I have seen, sorry, that most families though, I feel like they like being asked, and then when they are asked if they do have to get it done, it is 2.5 hours. No one likes that. Yet at least they know, well, I have my natural supports, I got my therapist, I got my advocate with me, like, and we all heard the same thing at the same time, and now we're moving forward. There's a sense of satisfaction with that.
That's true. And we're seeing more family support for the case plan. Sometimes even grandma and auntie were like, why does she have to do DV, right? Well, or domestic violence, I should say. And, you know, like this, they don't ask those questions as much when they're part of the process. I'm sorry, Eileen.
I was just going to say, I think you guys are also answering, because I'm just scanning the questions. So CANs only completed during CFTMs. In my county, we use CANs to justify funding. CANs are therefore completed before CFTMs. And then do you complete CANs for every child in the family? So I think in a sense you answered that, but I don't know if you want to add more to that.
Lauren, is there a place they can go for the PowerPoint? I posted it on the file thing, but not everyone can see it for some reason.
Yeah, we usually post them after the conference. We either post them on the TCOM training website. We are working on a new website for the University of Kentucky, so they'll likely be posted there. And we will also be posting this recording as well.
Awesome. And then people are asking, Eileen, for your the forms that you had created. Is it okay to include those with the PowerPoint?
Absolutely. We'll attach those as well.
So we'll do that. And then a few of you put your emails in there. So yeah, Lisa, I'll send those to you for sure.
Yes. Do you all provide the facilitators with that training, the overview training, or someone else?
Can I say like both?
The train. Okay.
Yeah, both. We kind of started when the contract first came in 2018. We went through a lot of like child welfare and probation and in-depth one. And now that we're, 2-3 years in, we do our own. So a combination with refreshers is needed. Lisa?
Yeah, and as stuff comes up, they'll ask for support, right, Laura? So like safety organized practice language, which is our engagement tools that we use, they asked for some support around that. They're started doing some of our family maintenance cases, so they asked for some, so just definitely very positive collaboration.
All right, so did we answer the question about, so we do complete the CANs prior to the CFT meeting as well. So I think like Shelly said, it's at point of entry, and then it can be pencil scored before the CFT meeting and then discussed during the meeting. I'm going to move down to the next question. It's are the CFTs done for outpatient clients or residential clients? Is that CANs or CFT? Yvette, did you mean our CFTs done for outpatient clients and residential clients, or did you mean CANs?
Either way, we do for both, right?
Yes, yes. So the and maybe this rolls into the next question about the idea of 1 CANs in the CFTM. And so yes, BHS providers are instructed to complete the CANs upon intake to any mental health program, and then as Shelly shared, upon entry into child welfare services, they'll complete one. So depending on who completes it first, that the most current CANs is going to be the one discussed either in the CFT meeting, or if they've had a CFT meeting and they refer to the mental health provider and then the mental health provider completes one, they need to share that CANs with the social worker. So it's just a lot of back and forth, and everyone should be working off of the one that was most recently completed. In practice, is it perfect? No, I'm not going to say it's perfect by any means. But again, we keep striving for that is the goal. And so we just keep messaging it, and we sound like broken records sometimes, but that's what we do.
That's a good point. And I was just thinking, I'll also, in those attachments, I'll include our our CANs frequently asked questions, which is really about the kind of the practice, right? So I have a policy, you guys are welcome to it as well. It's only 7 pages. It's like social worker does this, facilitator does this, but the frequently asked questions is more about the actual practice, how to do it, how to have the conversation. What if dad isn't present? What do you do? So I'll be happy to include that.
So there's a question about working on integrating cans into the permanency plan. So Shelly, you probably could answer that one.
Yeah, we also do, we call it concurrent planning. So the goal is for the child to go home to the parent, but we need to do this parallel process, right? We talk about being 2 tracks of the train, going down the train track. What would you do? All of us have to think about it as parents. If something happened to us, who would we want to care for our children? So we're talking about that during the child and family team, this concurrent planning, making a plan in case the reunification isn't successful. So we do that. It isn't a very extensive part of the conversation, and I think that's probably because we do a lot of the work before. We require genograms and echo maps to be done with our clients during referral status. So we've been having some of these conversations.
There's another question about actionable item on CAN's needs and action on permanency plan. We are moving towards the CANs actually feeding the permanency plan creation tool electronically. So I don't know if that's more of a comment, but I think you spoke to that, Shelly.
Okay.
Where are the CANs stored if both parties are doing it? Great question. So BHS, they have created a database where the mental health providers, they input their data in there, and a lot of reports can be generated from there. And I know that CWS, is CDSS, are they still working on creating a database?
They have the CWS Cares, which is our web-based version. But it can create reports if it has 2 data points, but we don't have the ability to have all of our social workers enter the data yet. So far, this is the only component that's working of this. Once we use it more regularly, I think we'll be using it more. Right now, we upload it into our CWS CMS, which is our data management system.
Right. So, I mean, ideally, it'd be great to have one data system, but I think that's probably far in the future.
Agreed.
Another question. I work for a behavioral health organization in California, and we are working on ironing out our procedures related to CANs. I would love to hear if you have insight into what should be included in terms of sharing CANs across multiple providers, barriers you ran into, and what have you learned about that process? So what I can share is, we thought about that. And so in the database, we now have permitted 2 persons from each program to have a super user access. And so they have to leverage both our electronic health record to see if a youth entering their program was ever provided services by a previous mental health provider. If so, they can go into the database and pull back CANs that the other provider created. So working from that lens, yes, it's still working into integrating the one CANs and the previous CAN should inform. It just really depends on time frame. If the youth was seen by a provider a year before, you probably would just want to start a whole new assessment, but you can always access that previous CANs to just, ensure that you haven't missed anything with, any historic component.
And between BHS and child welfare, we share the complete CANs. We don't redact anything. And we provide it to wraparound when we're referring. We provide it to our therapist. So it's a pretty widely shared, as appropriate, obviously. But
someone from Idaho definitely has run into issue in giving access to appropriate providers to the CAN. So yeah, we've really worked hard, like Shelly said, to make sure that we're sharing this information. Because again, like all these perspectives, we need to ensure that we're not confusing the family and really supporting them with, if they shared with us that this is a need, that we're all aware that this is a need. And, reducing this, like telling their story, so many different times.
Yeah, people are asking how we share the CANs because it has substance abuse information. And so, yes, our parents do sign a consent as they enter into the CFT meeting. Actually, everybody in the room signs the confidentiality statement. I guess we're doing it virtually now, right, Laura? Laura's nodding her head. Yeah, so, but yes, we have their consent to talk about it. If one of the parents isn't present, we don't talk about them because they're not present to consent about that. So, so we do share it with the behavioral health providers and with all of our BHS partners, even though it has substance abuse information.
Does SSA and BH share access to database that the CANS is stored? Did you need to create an MOU?
No, the state of California was really clear with their ACL 1881, which is the all county letter, and it said that we would share information. So it took that need to have like extra MOUs or consents or releases between us. That was really appreciated. We don't share the same system, so literally we attach it to referral documents. Do you still rate the parent if they're not present? No, we don't. They have to be present to consent to the conversation. So if the parent isn't present and they choose not to communicate to the social worker will ultimately complete their section of the caregiver rating tool, and they will literally write on there, social worker completed without parent. We want to be very transparent with the judge. By the way, Eileen and I presented to the judge and the attorneys in San Diego, and the judge said, you will attach these to your court reports. And I was like, no, we're not going to. And this is why. You're going to know everything that happened. If it's a 2 or a 3, it's on the case plan. I had such a beautiful argument, right, Eileen?
Yes, you did.
And I did not win, man. The director of child welfare got a call and we attached it to court reports. So in the beginning, we were really scared it was going to be litigated. We were like, oh my gosh, we're going to be on the stand and they're going to be like, why did you score a 2? And we haven't had it litigated one time. We've done over 7,000 CANS conversations and CFTs, friends. In San Diego County, we've attached 7,000 CANs to court reports. They've never been litigated. And I quickly realized, here's the answer, by the way, to the question, why did you score it a 2? That's what the group came to a decision about, right? It actually takes a lot of responsibility off of the social worker. I don't have to defend my score. We made a decision together as 7 or 10 people.
And then just one point of clarity. So although BHS is sharing the CANs with CWS, the social worker, the BHS CANs is not attached to the.
That's totally right. Yes. So, we just mentioned BHS. So we say for substance abuse for the child, is it a 0, 1, 2, or 3? But we don't put any details. But behavioral health has a module that gets much more detailed, and also one about sexuality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we do not attach the BHS CANs to the court report. That is the child's confidential information. Did we miss any questions? We have 4 minutes. You guys have been so amazing. Thank you for coming. And you have our emails. We're happy to talk. Like, this is one of my favorite conversations, and people in San Diego are so tired of hearing about the CANs. And we're in year 3. If a client is already in behavioral services and new to SSA, do you obtain the CANs for mental health? Yes. Doesn't happen too often, but we do have some kids that come to us out of like a psych hospital, and they will give us their CANs. Did we, any last questions? I'm so sorry if we missed any questions.
Your CANs have justification comment boxes for each item.
Nope.
Actually, BHS does. So we actually inserted, well, what we have is we have something that crosswalks over to our BHA. So for every item that they have rated as a 2 or a 3, they need to check off where in the BHA they made some narrative or comment in regard. So that was our attempt to ensure that BHS providers knew that there had to be this clinical integration and then to develop a good treatment plan to address those needs.
So for child welfare, we don't, but here's kind of how it's the equivalent, I think. If we score a 2 or a 3, then there has to be an action item around it. So for example, I'm gonna give you a quick example. If child scores a 2 for sleep, so they're struggling with sleep, it's impacting their functioning, maybe at school the next morning, we're gonna put in an action item on there. So one time we had a child, we said, why can't you sleep? And they said, I'm so scared about what's happening to mommy. So they weren't hearing from mommy every day. So we set up a plan that the child would get a phone call at 7 p.m. every night from mom. They would talk for 10 minutes. And then that alone resolved the child's sleep issues. So the action item was that mom would call every night at 7. Mom did call every night at 7, and it resolved the sleep issue. Sometimes it's not that easy, right? Sometimes we're going to refer them to therapy, or we're going to refer them to see their primary care physician to consider melatonin or something like that. But anyway, every 2 or 3 gets an action item. Doesn't have to be a case plan item. So I think, it doesn't have to be part of the protective issue, but we're going to address it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming and participating in your great questions.
Yeah, have a wonderful afternoon. Feel free to email us.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming.
I'm just going to put the last slide.